People sometimes ask me what it's like being a park ranger. I have to admit it's a dream job for the most part. I work as a wilderness ranger, and that means I get to go out by myself, with little to no supervision. Wandering Yosemite National Park alone, I look for ways to restore nature to its proper state. I try to keep the park looking the way it's supposed to, pristine and beautiful, just the way it has been since long before humans were around to disrupt it. If you ask me what I was looking for, I'd be hard-pressed to say it out loud. I just know it when I see it. The telltale signs of human activity which indicate a camping party has visited an area recently. People will often rearrange logs, rocks around fire pit. They'll leave trash laying around. Half-burnt sticks used for roasting marshmallows and other signs of their presence will be scattered about. Hand-dug latrines, holes filled with cigarette butts, and all sorts of crude words and phrases carved into trees. I've seen things that make my eyes water, as a lover of nature and the untouched wilderness. My job is to correct their mistakes where possible, returning the wilderness to its natural form so that the next person to come along doesn't have to shed a tear at the sight of the forest, watching as it slowly deteriorates with each subsequent visit. I think my job is vital. I'd hate to consider what this place might look like without people like me. But every once in a while, even someone as experienced as me can make a mistake. And that's exactly what happened to me. I made a terrible mistake. And now the wilderness I've always sought to protect has turned against me. I'm not sure if I'm going to get out of this alive. My uncle was the one who first told me about fairy rings. If you're ever walking alone through a forest, and you stumble across a ring of mushrooms and it looks too perfect, don't touch it, he said to me once. Those rings are made by fairies, and if you disturb them, they'll come after you. You might have bad luck, or even worse, you could fall into their world and become trapped there. Uncle Bill had worked as a park ranger in his younger days, and he had lots of great stories about working at Yosemite National Park. Maybe that was partly why I wanted to get into this line of work. When I was younger, he told me and my older brother plenty of stories based in fact, but also quite a few that were based on folklore and legends, and some that he pulled straight out of his ass. Those were usually the best ones, and it was often hard to tell the truth from fiction, at least for me. As I got older, I learned that many of the stories my Uncle Bill told me were fantastical lies, but I never held that against him. He made the world into a wild, hilarious, and magical place for me from an early age. I remember he'd sing songs while playing his acoustic guitar around the campfire, making up the funniest lyrics I'd ever heard as he went along. To my young mind, it was like magic, even if he was just replacing the lyrics to Candyman with Candy Dog. To me, it was mind-blowing. Weird Al had nothing on my Uncle Bill, as far as I was concerned. And I'll never forget that feeling of walking through the forest with him, marveling as he explained the subtleties of nature, and believing in all the hidden things he explained to me, real or not. Of course, as an adult, I didn't believe in magical things anymore. Fairy rings were not made by fairies. They were natural. Although there were competing theories on how they came about, I had learned in college that it was a biological process. There's plenty of folklore around these odd-looking mushroom circles, but none of it is based in fact. Or at least, so I thought. But then all of that changed. Recently I came across a ring of mushrooms in the forest, looking far too perfect and organized. In the back of my mind I recalled the advice from my uncle, but I no longer took it seriously. I reminded myself that he'd always loved to tell me tales of magical, fantastical things. That didn't mean they were true, though. Once, when I was a small child, we were canoeing and I was getting tired. I wanted to go back. And he had told me that if we just kept going on this particular lake, there was a Kentucky Fried Chicken just up ahead. I had pretended not to believe him, but a little piece of 8-year-old me had been genuinely curious if we would find the Colonel and his secret blend of herbs and spices, located on a floating restaurant dock on the lake just around the next bend. Even though I didn't believe this ring of mushrooms was made by fairies, I didn't want to disturb it. It looked surreal and beautiful, all the way out here in the middle of the forest. I just stood and admired it for several long moments. A sound came from behind me, startling me, and I spun around to see a deer in the woods, just a little ways away. For some reason, I decided to take a picture of it, and set my backpack down to take out my phone. I was looking down as I unzipped the bag, and when I looked back up again, I was shocked to see the deer was just a few feet away now, standing right in front of me. I backed up instinctively and felt the large mushrooms being crushed underfoot as I did so. The deer reared up on its hind legs for a second, turned around, disappearing into the forest again. My heart beating too fast, I looked down at the ring of mushrooms, now destroyed. What had been a complete circle was now a lazy arc, with a mashed up pile of brown mush at one end. Shit, I said out loud, looking down at the gunk on my boot heel. I scraped the mush off my shoe on a nearby rock, feeling suddenly nervous, for reasons I couldn't understand. Why did I feel like I had broken some law? Like I had just grievously injured an innocent person. I hated disturbing nature in any way, hence my chosen profession. So I just chalked it up to a feeling of guilt over trampling the beautiful ring of mushrooms. Looking around the forest, I tried to ignore the feeling that there were eyes watching me. Was Mother Nature silently judging me from all around? Or was that just my imagination? Sorry, fairies, I muttered, picking up my backpack and moving on from the circle of mushrooms that was now a horseshoe of mushrooms and a brown splatter on one end. I started moving again and looked up to see a storm was rolling in. There wasn't one predicted, but the weather around this area could be random at times, and it wasn't the first time the meteorologists had been wrong. I figured I should start heading back towards the ranger station, so I turned around to go back the way I had come. There was no trail in this part of the forest. It was all navigated by landmarks and compass. I knew I had to head north and travel back up the slope, and eventually I'd find my way to the top of a ridge. From there, I would make my way back down toward a hiking trail. The cliffs far off to the east would serve as a constant marker after that, once I was within sight of them. I knew the park so well I could picture it all in my mind's eye. Plenty of thick forest was in my way between here and there, but it was easy enough to navigate if you knew how to keep a straight line. I started walking, picking up the pace, when I heard a rumble of thunder heading my way. The storm was moving in very quickly, and a cold breeze rushed through my hair and chilled the back of my neck as if to confirm this. After 15 minutes of walking steadily uphill, the wind was picking up even further, causing branches to come crashing down from the trees. The towering wooden columns stood swaying violently all around me, making me feel very nervous that something could fall down on me from above. Weirdly, the ground began to slope downwards. This didn't seem right, so I paused for a second to check my compass, but it was missing from its usual spot where I attached it to my belt. Weird. It had only been there 20 minutes prior. Reaching my other hand down to feel for my radio, I noticed with increasing panic that it was gone as well. My heart began to beat a little faster as I looked through my bag and all my gear, trying to find these two crucial pieces of equipment. I never left the ranger station without either one. I continued moving on in what I thought was the right direction, hoping I was just remembering the landscape wrong. Maybe there was a valley before the ground sloped upwards again. I had been mistaken before about things like this, and I usually found it was the best course of action to just go with my gut. The problem was, my gut wasn't sure anymore. I knew this was the right way, but my eyes weren't matching my sense of direction. I checked the moss on a nearby tree and saw it confirmed my internal compass. Still feeling uneasy, I continued moving along, going deeper and deeper into this part of the forest, into what looked like a dark valley. As I walked, I began to see things that didn't make sense. Plants that I had never seen before. Mushrooms in various shades and colors, ranging from greens to reds, yellows, and oranges. Even a few that were blue with yellow polka dots. I came upon 3 snowy white mushrooms that were so tall and broad, they were as big as a child. They stood at waist height and swayed as I approached, as if aware of my presence. I'd never seen anything like them, and wondered if I had accidentally ingested some sort of hallucinogen when I stepped on that fairy ring. Or maybe you fell into their world, another voice in my mind said, sounding like my Uncle Bill. No, it isn't possible, I muttered to myself. This isn't possible. The clouds above were turning black with approaching rain, and that chilly breeze came again, running cold fingers through my hair. I spun around at the sound of movement behind me. Terrified of what it could be, I reeled backwards, my eyes wide, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. There was no one behind me, but something was very different. The trees had moved. Several large firs were now blocking my way completely, standing next to each other in a way that did not even remotely resemble the ways in which trees grew. They were shoulder to shoulder, with no room for root growth or for light to come through. It occurred to me after several minutes that there was only one thing that could have happened. The trees were moving. They were alive, and they were surrounding me, cutting off my escape. I spun around and ducked away from the huge white swaying mushrooms as they swiveled, their huge caps turning like heads to watch me go. My legs feeling like jelly, I began to run faster than I'd ever run before, racing through the forest, going deeper and deeper into this dark, uncanny valley. Birds called from the trees above, their song was unfamiliar and strange. I began to see flowers and other plants that seemed to be watching me as well, just like the mushrooms and the trees, and I realized the forest was keenly aware of my presence. The trees were allowing me through, making a path for me, as if this was the way they wanted me to go. I didn't know where I was running to, just that I needed to get away from those moving trees and the mushrooms that seemed to be watching me. But things were only getting stranger as I moved deeper into the forest. Finally, the ground leveled off and the trees parted completely to reveal a river inlet. Towering cliffs stood on either side of the water, going straight up more than 100 feet on both sides. There was a hollow half log of driftwood floating on the water, looking to me very much like a raft. I turned around to see the trees had closed in, blocking my exit. There was only one way to go. Forward. Up above, the skies were dark and swirling, and rain began to pour down, drenching me completely as I climbed onto the log. I let my legs hang off either side and straddled it as the river began to swell. A few seconds later, I was drifting downstream on the buoyant log. It seemed like this whole area of the forest was one giant hive mind, and it was guiding me somewhere. No, it was taking me somewhere. As I drifted along the stream, the current picked up speed until it was a quickly rushing river. Rapids and whirlpools tossed me up and down and spun me around, sending the log tilting and tumbling over rocks and waterfalls. My legs scraped against stone and were cut on their sharp edges, and several times I lost my grip in the slick wood in the rain and nearly went headlong into the rapids. The water began to calm slightly, and I looked up to see there were now caves dotting the cliffs, looking down on me from above. Black holes pockmarked their sheer vertical walls like doorways into the unenterable homes of creatures that dwelled impossibly there. There was no discernible way to get up to those dark entrances to those caves, and yet I saw multiple red glowing eyes looking out at me from each one. This forced my mind to imagine the type of creature which could dwell in such a gravity-defying abode, and I imagined humanoid chameleons, giant lizard men, who scaled the smooth vertical walls of granite, climbing the stone as if they had suction cups attached to their hands and feet. Shuddering at this mental image, I just hoped those creatures weren't hungry, and that they wouldn't decide to come down to the river to greet me. Their glaring eyes watched me as I drifted along, and I was so distracted by them that I didn't even notice the gravel shoreline coming up. Unprepared, my momentum threw me from the log, and I went tumbling into the rocky shore. I stood and looked up to see I was just outside a cave. It stood before me ominously, and I heard strange noise coming from inside. This made me curious, and I found myself taking tentative steps into the cavern. As my eyes adjusted, I saw there were steps leading down, carved into the rock. The wet stone dripped with moisture, cold water landing on my head and my hands occasionally. It was still pouring outside. It was nice to be out of the rain, although I was still more than a little frightened. "They'll want your eye," a voice said from the shadows, causing me to jump. "Who's there?" I yelped. "Just one will suffice, but if one is better than the other, you'd better give them that one and not the other." I spun around at the sound, looking for the source of it. "Down here," it said, and I looked to see a small rabbit. Its eyes were red, its fur white, an albino. "What did you say? How are you talking? You're a rabbit," I objected, as if this were the least sensible thing to happen to me today. "There's no time for this. The longer you stay, the more you're going to lose. Don't ask questions, just do as I tell you." The bunny was insistent as it was cute. I was reminded a bit of the rabbit from Alice in Wonderland. The comparison seemed very apt at this moment. I just hoped this rabbit could lead me out of here. "Oh, okay," I said. "I'll trust you." "Good," the rabbit said. "Listen closely. You've desecrated a sacred place." The fairy ring. I tried to interrupt to say I hadn't meant to, but he shushed me and continued. "It doesn't matter if you meant to or not. Those up ahead are the ones tasked with protecting this place. You must make it up to them, and there's only one way." I thought about his first words to me. My eyes? They want my eyes? No. Just one eye. You can pick, like I said, just so long as one isn't noticeably better than the other. I tried to protest again, but he was already hopping away. His little fuzzy white tail, the last thing I saw before he disappeared into the shadows. "Great," I said to myself when he was gone. "Just an eye. That's all." I made my way down the stone steps and deeper into the darkness. Fire spouted from torches up ahead, leading me towards a raised platform where figures stood waiting for me. As I got closer, I saw what they were. Giant toads. Each one as large as a Volkswagen Beetle. Their eyes were strange and faceted like mosquitoes, dark and reflective as polished jewels, and staring intently at me as I approached. Their glaring eyes lacked any emotion. It was like a panel of judges, I realized, as I marched into the midst of them. They looked at me coldly for several long minutes, until I wondered if they were waiting for me to do something. "They'll want your eye," I remembered the rabbit saying. That was insane. I wasn't going to give these monsters my eye. For what, stepping on a few mushrooms? I scoffed at them and turned around to leave, but found myself face to face with cold, wet stone. The cave had shrunk, and it was now only this small room, just barely big enough for me and these 5 enormous toads who stared at me with blank eyes. "What do you want from me?" I asked, raising my voice to ask them again when they didn't respond. Finally, one of them did something different. It glanced down at the cold stone floor of the cavern, and I followed its gaze to see a sharp rock, like a broken piece of graphite. I found myself reaching down to pick it up. "No, I can't," I said. But the longer we stood there, the more it became apparent that I would have to. The stink of the toads and the damp chill of the cave was becoming oppressive. If I wanted to leave, I would need to do what the rabbit said. Somehow, he had known. As if this was the way it was meant to be. Time passed. I debated and pleaded with them. I got down on my knees and cried, but they never blinked an eye. Finally, after what felt like hours inside that cave, I decided I had to do it. I realized there was no other way. My heart pounding with terror, I lifted the sharp stone to my left eye and watched as the toads began to nod their oversized heads, their wide mouths stretching into even wider grins. I dug the point of the stone into my eye socket and began to pry and twist, thrusting it deeper until my vision clouded with darkness and red. The pain was so bad I had to stop several times and felt my knees buckling as I almost passed out from the agony. The slippery gore made it difficult to find purchase, but after several attempts, I finally managed to leverage the eyeball from its socket. Twisting and digging, it came out the rest of the way and fell, dangling from the tendon like a tether, swaying and spinning as it hung from my ruined face. One of the toads snapped out its tongue and grabbed hold of the eye, yanking it backwards towards itself and tearing the tendon in half in the process. The pain of that was terrible, somehow worse than anything yet. Gasping for breath, I dropped the blood-slicked stone to the floor of the cavern, bending over at the waist and trying to keep my lunch down. I felt queasy and sick about what I had just done. A terrible feeling welling up inside of me that I was now broken, and had just lost some essential part of myself. Like when you'd lose an adult tooth, or sever a finger with a table saw. I was not going to get that eye back. It was gone forever, and was now being digested in the belly of a great, mythological toad. I blinked my one remaining eye, and when I opened it again, I was standing back in the forest, with my boot in a puddle of squashed mushrooms. The fairy ring. I was standing half inside and half outside of it. I took my foot out of the circle, feeling the warmth of blood running down my face from my missing eye. Looking up at the sky, I saw it was clear and blue, with no indication of the storm I had witnessed earlier. There were no more dark clouds, no more crashes of thunder. It was as if the whole thing had been a daydream, if not for the fact that I was missing my eye. I had no doubt that it was necessary for me to leave that place, though. If I hadn't done what I did, that other world would not have let me go. If not for the rabbit and his advice, I never would have escaped. I made my way back to the ranger station. This time the hill sloped upward the whole way, just as expected. At the top there was a ridge with cliffs in the distance, guiding my way back home. When I got back to the ranger station, there was only one little problem. My boss acted like I didn't exist. At first, I thought he was upset with me for some reason. I tried to talk to him calmly, but eventually resorted to yelling and screaming in his face. Nothing I did seemed to make a difference. Just like I was invisible to him. My other coworkers and my friends and family, none of them could see me anymore either. I've gone to see everyone I know and they all act like I'm a ghost. Like I never even existed. My landlord moved my things out of my apartment, put new locks on the door. Ever since that trip to the fairy world, or whatever that place was, I'm invisible to everyone. I'm a ghost. I can still use my phone, at least until it gets shut off for non-payment, so I've been doing some research. On fairy rings in particular. From what I've learned, there are lots of legends and myths surrounding them, but one caught my attention. Some say that if you wander into a fairy ring, you'll be transported to another world, and that you can only escape by giving up an eye to the guardians of that world. The guardians look like giant toads, with the eyes of insects. Other legends say that if you wander into a fairy ring, the magical creatures of the forest will trap you there, or make you disappear, so that no one can ever see you again. I think somehow I got the worst of both curses. I'm scared that this may never wear off. Whatever this spell is, it may be permanent.
They'll want your eye,
the rabbit had told me.
Just one will suffice. But if one is better than the other, you'd best give them that one, and not the other.
My left eye has always been a little worse. I was so used to it, I'd forgotten. It completely slipped my mind that my contact lens prescription was just a little bit stronger on that side. I wonder if somehow the toads knew. I'm going back out to the forest to try to make another deal with them. I'll give them anything, even if it's my other eye. I'd rather be blind than invisible. You have no idea what this is like. It's worse than death. I just hope I can find my way back to the fairy world. And back out of the forest again. I'm leaving now after typing this out. If you don't hear from me, you'll know where I am. I have a funny feeling I'll be missing both eyes pretty soon. But I'm okay with it. I have peace with nature. And nature has a piece of me. Thanks for watching the video today, everybody. I just want to take a very quick second to mention my novel, Beneath the Asylum. It's available right now on Amazon for just $5 Canadian. It's the first of two novels. The follow-up is called Escape from the Asylum, and you can check out the first chapter of both on the channel here. I've narrated both of the first chapters of each one, so you can check them out if you want on here, and then if you're interested in picking up the novel, it's just $5 Canadian right now for Beneath the Asylum, and I believe it's a pretty good deal in the US as well at the moment. So if you'd like to support the channel and support my writing and my narrations, I hugely appreciate anybody out there who's got a few extra bucks if you want to pick up my novel. It's kind of a comedic horror story inspired by a little bit by true life experiences from a time I worked as a security guard at a notoriously haunted local mental hospital that's like 150 years old. And there's these hidden tunnels that are beneath the mental hospital that are well known around town for being haunted. So it's an interesting premise, I think, and it's one of the best things I've ever written. So if you want to check that out, please look at the description of the video down below, and I hope you'll take a look at my Amazon page and check out my books. Thanks for watching the video again, everybody. Please like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. and I'll be back again in a couple days at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with another short horror narration. All right, have a good night, everybody.